Over time, the animal attack subgenre became one of the most popular and lucrative in horror, so naturally these movies became a dime a dozen through the 21st century, particularly in the era of streaming and straight-to-TV filmmaking. Studios like the Asylum cashed in on the popularity of existing horror films and franchises to make low-budget B-movies for high profit, sparking a wave of other filmmakers and studios trying to do the same. These films didn't have much going for them except a pun in the title and a kind of so bad they're good charm. But when it comes to films like Sharknado and Zombeavers, are they actually so bad they're good? Or are they just plain bad?
It's like a bag of dicks!
There's no way I'm drunk enough for this.
Join me as we continue exploring the evolution of nature in horror and we discuss two cult B-movie classics, Sharknado and Zombeavers. Welcome back to the evolution of horror. My name is Mike Muncer, and as ever, I am your host. In this podcast, we explore and dissect the history and the evolution of the horror genre, one subgenre at a time. We are currently in the middle of our 10th season exploring the evolution of nature biting back in horror, and this is part 33. As we hurtle towards the end of the series, I felt it fitting to cover at least two kind of schlocky B-movies in the subgenre that is perhaps most packed with schlocky B-movies. So we're going to be discussing Sharknado from 2013 and Zombeavers from 2014. Both of these discussions will be spoilerific, I guess. So give them a watch, I guess, if you don't want to be spoiled. So joining me to discuss these movies, well, he is a very good friend of the podcast. You may know him from Stevie's Brain Rot podcast, regularly talking about Trash to Pieces over there, and he was last here on this podcast to discuss the Slumber Party Massacre and When a Stranger Calls Back. It is my great pleasure to welcome Matt Draper. Hello, Matt.
Hello, Mike Muncer.
Hello. How are you? How's January 2025 treating you so far?
Oh, wow. How long have you got, Mike?
Oh, my God. It's going to be like a therapy session, this. Yeah.
It's been a month of diminishing returns. I got back into this godforsaken country on the 14th of Jan, and it's all been downhill from there since my bubble of vacation was burst.
Oh,
here we are. And I'm not talking about the two films that you made me watch either. So.
Well, yeah, we'll see about that. Yeah.
When they're a high point of the month, you know there's a problem.
Yeah, that's an issue. That is definitely an issue. So we are talking, like last time you were here, we talked about the masterpiece. And, you know, we can't always be talking about movies as good as Citizen Kane, Matt, but last time you were here, we talked about When a Stranger Calls Back, which obviously is like the Citizen Kane of straight-to-video home invasion movies. Right?
True. I actually thought you were alluding to the last time we talked on your Patreon, where we covered the Academy Award-winning masterpiece, Godzilla -1, right?
A genuine masterpiece. That is true.
Exactly. And how the pendulum swings. What goes up must come down.
Exactly.
Like a great white sprouted forth from a
cloud above.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. So they can't all be as good as Godzilla -1, or indeed When a Stranger Calls Back, which I fucking loved. But before we get into these movies, Matt, let me ask you about just this subgenre generally. Obviously, we've been talking now for months about these kind of nature bites back movies, animal attack films, that kind of thing. What are your thoughts generally on this subgenre? Are you a fan?
I love it.
Yeah.
This is my bread and butter. This is my origin of love with the genre, right? And probably my infatuation with cinema. So dating back to as far as I can remember, like watching Jaws was a rite of passage in my household, where my dad, who wasn't a particularly big fan of film, my dad never watched anything, but he would occasionally just have such reverence for a great, like the classics, you know, if it wasn't Alien, it was The Matrix. Okay. Yeah. You know, but there were kind of standout films that he was really into, and Jaws being one of them. Like one day I remember him sitting me down and being like, "You're old enough to see this now." And I just, from there on, fell in love with this genre. Horror, this subgenre, marine horror is totally my bag.
Oh my God,
and
yeah.
even kind of throughout my journey, in my teens, younger years, of that age, we would just watch what was available a lot of the time, right? We didn't have everything to our fingertips in quite the same way we do now. So if it wasn't at the VHS rental store, it would be what was screening on late night Channel 5. So that for me was, I'm not talking about the Red Shoe Diaries, of course. I'm talking about the likes of Piranha, Joe Dante's. I loved stuff like the real B-movie fare, like from the 70s and 80s, Mosquito, Ticks. You did a whole episode covering some of that great 70s stuff. So if it was like any of that, that was it for me. This was kind of my gateway in a lot of ways to the genre. So
I love that.
Holds a real special place for me.
Oh, I love that. That's really nice. And why is it, do you think, that you love, and why is it that the world loves these sorts of movies? Like, we've talked a lot about how they've been so kind of enduringly popular, these kind of animal attack movies, from the real masterpieces down to the movies we're about to discuss, the kind of B-movie schlock. Like, what is it about them that makes them so crowd-pleasing, do you think?
Well, that in one, I think you have got such a broad range, haven't you? It's both ends of the spectrum, from Hitchcock's The Birds through Jaws, through, Velocipasta or Cocaine Bear. It really does. There's something for all tastes in there. But I think, it's kind of twofold as well, right? I've listened to you speak with other guests about kind of how the horrors of nature tap into something very primal in us as people, right? This is about our human instincts. It's our fight or flight. And, while we're now very far removed, although those of us maybe in, kind of developed countries are very far removed from a lot of these threats in our day-to-day life, it does bring us back to that kind of lizard brain way of thinking where we are, we're utilizing that. So, once again, we're in a genre, we're in a safe space where we can explore some of those fears. But also, if the film isn't taking itself seriously, we can just have a great ride. It can be brainless popcorn fun. And obviously that's kind of where we're veering into in today's discussion. When the world is in a dark place, as we were just discussing before the recording started, the world in some parts of in the world literally being on fire, or the scary political landscape we're in at the moment. This kind of stuff can be a really nice escape and quite a nice release, way to turn off and just watch some fucking people chainsaw sharks in half. Okay, cool.
Exactly that. Exactly. I agree. And Matt, you're a well-traveled man, it feels like. I always get quite jealous. Like, for anyone who doesn't follow Matt Draper on social media, you are always posting like these incredible places that you go to where you're suddenly on like a desert island, or you're lying in a hammock somewhere, or you're visiting a Mayan temple or something. I don't know if you've actually done that. But you always seem to be doing all these incredible things. Yeah. You seem to be doing all these incredible things that make me very jealous. But it seems like you are very good at just sort of being like out there in nature, in with the elements. Like, how do you find it generally?
Well, thank you for the very kind words. Of course, the reality and Instagram are different things, but yes, I am very fortunate. I get to go to some of these really cool places, and I am I'm not someone, I wouldn't call myself an active person, because I absolutely vehemently shy away from anything that involves strenuous effort. But I do love putting myself in really unusual and sometimes quite, like, I guess you could call them risky, thrilling situations, right? So, if it's, hang gliding in South America, or I was recently in Thailand and I did a 3-day scuba diving course in open water, got a qualification. Wow. So, that kind of stuff really does thrill me. I love like adrenaline seeking. Yeah. That being said, have I ever encountered anything in the way of like real dangerous animals? Probably not. Like, I was I was in Brazil staying in an Airbnb, and I was very perturbed once because we opened, after looking around the Airbnb, we opened, some of the kitchen cupboards, and they had kind of a can of what is essentially Scorpion Be Gone, with a great big scorpion with a red line crossed through it, spray repellent. And I was like, holy fuck, because we were staying like literally in the middle of the jungle with no one else around us. And I just thought, okay, I don't know what to do if like something venomous really gets me here. Yeah. So That's tricky. And after doing the scuba diving I recently did, I can definitely see how people have got get the bug for that. And, there's a real thrill in what you're going to see, what amazing marine life you're going to get to experience in its natural habitat. And I found myself not only thinking about when I can do more of that, but equally where I can go to see sharks in the wild.
Wow.
And I've been watching YouTube videos of what to do as a diver if you encounter a shark, having to push down on the nose and, just to be kind of, I like to be prepared. The chances are pretty slim to none, right? But it's always good to be on your guard.
Push down on the nose. Is that what you're supposed to do?
Yeah. Apparently if you put your hand on the tip of their nose and kind of gently push them down and away from you, because they can't swim backwards, right? They're not very agile. They will continue to kind of glide on and most likely just drift away and lose interest in you pretty quickly. But, again, you can talk about the shark perception out there and how cinema, there's that great documentary Shark Exploitation, that Shudder doc, which talks a lot about how film has made us view sharks through a very distorted lens. So the chances are so slim, but equally I find it fascinating to think, okay, if I'm one of the 1% who managed to not only see a shark in the wild, but maybe aggravate it, I need to know what to do next time.
That's incredible. Oh my God. Well, you're already so much braver than basically every guest I've ever had on this season so far, because most people are like, no, wouldn't go in the ocean, wouldn't go anywhere near where there are sharks. That's so exciting. Well, keep us updated with that.
I will do. Yeah. And the thing that I find more scary is not the wildlife out there. It's just like, landscape. So I discovered I'm really, really frightened of heights quite recently. Just because climbing, what it's like in a lot of countries you go to, if you're in Asia or something, there'll often be, signposts, go to the best viewpoint on the island, and you can climb these incredible mountains that, if you were to encounter this place in the UK, it would be completely restricted and you could only climb it with a guide and the right safety equipment, and you'd probably have to pay through the nose. But no, here you just, people are just going up there in their droves in flip-flops and, there's just an old tatty rope to hang on to and you hope for the best. And I've learned doing a bit of this kind of thing, and I found that when it gets to standing on anywhere that's a high outcropping, my legs literally turn to jelly and everything starts to spin. And I found myself in a position where I literally had to crawl back from a rock that I had made out my way onto a bit too confidently, because I thought, any false move here, I am going to plummet to my death and it's going to be horrendous.
Shit. Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I would be exactly the same. But yeah, those kind of, it's weird that, isn't it? When we're standing on the edge of some sort of cliff or mountaintop or something, I don't know if this is me being really weird, but do you ever get a feeling like you might just accidentally just jump off?
Yeah. Or that impulse to just do it, just to see what would happen.
Yeah. There's a weird sensation. Yeah. Like we're little lemmings or something, right? It's really weird.
That internal self-destruct button. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. Terrifying. So yeah, I mean, all of that is fascinating. Let's talk a little bit about the more sort of bad and movie end of the spectrum when it comes to this subgenre, right? And I've kind of tried to avoid this as much as possible throughout the season. And people are always asking me this. People are always like, we'd love to hear you cover more of those kind of so bad they're good movies. And we'd love you to do a season on so bad they're good movies. And I'm always like, absolutely fucking not. I don't want to do that. I don't want to put myself through that personally. But I thought we've got to do at least a couple of them for this particular subgenre. So I guess before we get into the films themselves, I want to ask you about this idea of this quote-unquote so bad they're good movies, right? Because it does feel like there have been, I guess they've always existed, but I feel like there's been a bit more of a kind of, almost a bit more of a cynical trend in that over the last 10 or 15 years, right? How high is your tolerance for these sorts of movies, these kind of, whatever we want to call them, these kind of B movies, mockbusters, whatever you want to call them,
Yeah. I mean, my tolerance as a whole is pretty high, I think. And maybe that's just come through being a genre fan for so long, because, the ratio of hits to misses out there is pretty imbalanced at times, right? You do have to wade through some dreck. But at the same time, I do think for me, there is a real love that I can find for kind of just absolute trash. And that comes probably from a lot of my love of like growing up with directors like John Waters, right? You know, the king of the Pope of trash, in fact.
Yeah.
But equally, the good trash out there tends to be the stuff I find that has been made with some kind of earnestness or sincerity from the creative team, you know, when it's not actually trying to be really bad, it can be really endearing and charming.
Yes.
And, you know, I point to something like, you know, like I mentioned Piranha. Okay. Joe Dante, I don't believe, set out to make a bad movie. He set out intentionally to make a B movie, a low budget film that was cashing in on the success of Jaws, but he wanted it to still be enjoyable and thrilling, right? And audiences did find it. So, you know, look at Tommy Wiseau, The Room. He didn't deliberately make that as bad as it is, but it's really tapped into something. You know, you could go on and on. Killer Clowns, B movie. It's not a bad movie. There's a distinction to be made. Greatest film in the world. Showgirls, right?
Yes,
Indisputably. But again, I don't think Paul Hovan intended for that to get panned by critics. And now it's a complete cult favorite. So yeah, this is where I think what we're talking about today tips maybe into the cynical side, as you described it, you know, where we're actually looking at studios who have gone out of their way to make something as bad as they can.
Right. Yeah, it's so interesting. And yet they are still super popular, right? I mean, we'll get into this, but look at how successful these Sharknado movies and these kind of similar things are, right? It almost doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that I find a bit depressing. Like, it almost doesn't matter what the intentions are, whether they're even interested in making a good movie. It's as long as it's got like a pun in the title and some sort of high concept, people are going to be like, yeah, let's go see it, we're into it no matter what, kind of thing, you know.
It is lazy at its core to some points, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's still happening now. Look at the Pooniverse, right? Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. We've got Peter Pan's Nightmare Neverland or whatever it's called coming out now. Yeah, it's just, there is such a market for this stuff. And I think the viral trend has really helped this along its way, hasn't it? And yeah, we'll get into Sharknado, but so much of its success comes from what the internet and what Twitter did for it. Right.
And I wonder if that's why, because that was going to be the next thing I was going to ask you is like, it feels like there's been a particular wave of it this last 10, 20 years, you know, like, and I wonder if that is down to the internet as well as just stuff like streaming platforms, video on demand, right? There is just more space now for very cheap, quick, easy movies, I guess.
Yeah. And maybe like I compared this almost in a way to like the found footage genre, subgenre, because again, you know, cheap, easy, you're not looking at, you know, a studio or a producer doesn't need to onboard the greatest talent. You know, you might, if you're lucky, get a star who's now in kind of their latter stages of their career. Yeah. Maybe they're having a bit of a revival moment here. Again, we see this in Sharknado with some of our lead cast. And I think where perhaps the practical effects of yore that would have been required to make a film of this nature have now been replaced by CG visual effects, and they have themselves become more accessible, you know, cheaper to do. There are whole VFX teams and companies out there that can do the stuff on a dime. It doesn't have to look great, but it's serviceable. That's made maybe this wave of doing like big disaster or, you know, monster movies kind of have its resurgence. And it was going on before Sharknado, you know, even prior to Sharknado 2013, we had stuff like Sharktopus or, you know, Killer Shark versus Sharktocroc or Crocosaurus or something, you know, Piranhaconda is another one. These were kind of all bubbling away in the background. And I think, you know, that period in time is very interesting when you look at where horror was as a whole, because, you know, prior to this, we'd come from, you know, the late 90s J horror boom, which was super scary, but very much taking itself seriously. We had the bro horror era, you know, Hollywood giving us all of the Hostels, the Saws, really nasty, grisly stuff. New French Extremity was kind of trickling along over in Europe on the other side of that. Yeah. and we'd had the whole big remake and reboot wave.
Yeah.
So maybe around 2010, studios were just starting to go, or audience were thinking like, okay, let's just do something that's original to a point, kind of, creative, innovative in its concept, but really easy to do and doesn't require much effort or engagement from our audience. And people can just tap into this on a Saturday night with their mates, get drink, get high, and just watch this.
Yeah.
And it's throwaway and it's silly. And the internet just kind of took it from there by storm, didn't it?
I think so. I think that's what it is. And I think there's an interesting correlation too. Like a few weeks ago or months ago now in the series, we were talking about those kind of 90s, more Hollywood sort of B movies like this, right? So Anaconda, Deep Blue Sea, what's it called? Deep Rising, those sorts of movies, even Tremors, right? Like those movies we could consider slightly trashy B movies, but even they had more heart and soul to them, I would say, than, for example, the wave that we're about to talk about, Again,
for me, it's that distinction between B movie and bad movie. B doesn't have to mean bad, but everyone involved in those movies you described probably were giving it their all to make it something decent, Like, who doesn't love Tremors? It's a film full of love, I guess. Like, it's
absolutely, that is what it is. There's so
full
much
of
love.
care for what they're doing, for the craft and for the creature itself, and they're trying to give audiences a unique and original story.
Yeah. Exactly. I think that's what it is. And so even Hollywood-made movies had more heart and love, I think, than some of these ones. And then you get to The Meg, which for me is one of the absolute most infuriatingly bad movies of this ilk, And again, a lot of people kind of really love that movie and asking me to include that in the series, and I just can't, Matt. I can't sit through that movie again. I thought it was so boring and cynical and awful.
And it's interesting you choose The Meg because as a comparison to what we're talking about today, The Meg, I don't know off the top of my head what the budget was, but I am guessing pretty big, right? We're talking a Hollywood-backed movie. Yeah. And for me, there's something a little more egregious when a studio puts out a film like that is really lazy and has invested so many dollars into it and it's still not good.
Yeah.
I can actually forgive a film like Sharknado for the cost and, the intention behind it almost. They're not trying to fool anyone into thinking it's going to be something more than it is.
Yeah.
Whereas I think The Meg, what I found frustrating about it was actually on paper, I thought, great big budget, giant shark, prehistoric shark movie. I should love this.
Yes, exactly.
And it should be good with the kind of funding and, the resources that were available to that production.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still boring as fuck.
Yeah.
So, what's gone wrong here?
And that's the thing, right? The biggest sin is to be boring, I think.
To be boring,
with these sorts of films, right? That's the one thing they cannot be. And to be fair to Sharknado, it's actually not. It's not boring, that's for sure.
I was never bored.
No.
I never once drifted to my phone. So, yeah.
Exactly.
I agree.
Exactly. So there you go. Well, let's get into it then. Let's begin by talking about Sharknado from 2013.
Can't just wait here and wait for sharks to rain down on us.
Wow, Matt, start us off. It's probably a fairly easy job, this, but give us a little brief plot synopsis of Sharknado.
Well, that's the brilliance of all of these movies, right? They are the Ronsel effect. They all do exactly what they say on the tin. The title gives you all you need to know, and that's probably pretty much where the writing team stopped. Okay? So,
I think the tagline even is like, enough said, right? As in, like,
it is
in the title, that's all you need to know. Yeah.
Exactly. They knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
So the story, I say in inverted commas, for anyone who doesn't know, as a freak hurricane descends upon Los Angeles, literally hundreds of sharks of all different species are swept from Mexico into the Hollywood and Beverly Hills neighborhoods in giant tidal waves, causing flooding and destruction and ultimately building into a series of tornadoes with teeth, which cause mayhem and rain sharks upon the city. against that backdrop, our reluctant hero and ex-pro surfer turned bar owner, Finn, of course, eye roll, and his comrades, Nova and George, have to traverse their way through the chaos to rescue Finn's estranged ex-wife, April, played by Tara Reid, and his children, while also devising a plan to prevent the incoming Sharknadoes from demolishing LA.
Yeah, absolutely. There you go, in a nutshell. So, Matt, this was a first-time watch for you, right?
Amazingly.
Yeah, amazingly. This kind of surprised me. What did you think of Sharknado?
It's weird that I hadn't seen it. And I guess because, as we're saying about the title, I kind of felt like I knew what it was, right? You kind of know what you're getting with it. Mm-hmm. And much in the way that I think everyone knew what Sharknado in the world was, right?
Yeah.
Like something like the Human Centipede, that was just so, exactly. It was such a wild concept that captured everyone's imaginations that even I don't think everyone who knew about it went out to see it. They just kind of were talking about it in the office or whatever in their day-to-day life. So I was definitely there. It was, known to me in my periphery, but I just hadn't made the effort because I kind of didn't make it, I guess. But yeah. What did I think of it? It was weirdly, it wasn't quite what I expected. I was really expecting more of a comedy horror, and this, for me, didn't really play the comedy that heavily. It's really kind of playing it, it sounds ludicrous, it's kind of playing it pretty straight. It's giving us a disaster movie with sharks being spun around in tornadoes and spat at people and chomping their heads off. There are some kind of comic moments, of course, because the film recognizes how ridiculous that is. We might talk about the science behind that in a minute. but it is, for the most part, I was expecting something that was going to be full of gags, full of visual gags, slapstick moments, full of dialogue gags. We get a few nods to Jaws, of course. How could we not? And there's a few little kind of puns and play on words. But on the whole, the film really didn't make me laugh, and not because it was trying to and it failed, just because it wasn't really leaning into the comedy of it all that much. So it's kind of, it is bad. That's undoubtable. I don't think I could, with any good faith or credibility, say that this is a good movie, but I didn't hate it. I just kind of let it wash over me like a nice shark-filled wave and took it all in. And, it just serviced what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I sort of agree with you, really. This was the second time I'd watched it, although the first time I watched it, I was not completely paying attention. It was one of those situations where I was drinking, I was with friends, someone had it on in the house, So this was really the first time I'd properly sat down and watched it. And it's quite bad. And I feel a bit confused again by these sorts of films. This is just something that I just cannot get my head around. It's exactly like you said, Matt, like it's not necessarily leaning into the fun and comedy maybe as much as it could. It sort of takes itself quite seriously in the kind of human drama, but maybe that's part of the fun. Maybe that earnestness is supposed to be funny. I don't know. And the problem is it is, I think, one of the ugliest looking films I've ever seen in my life, right? Just the look, the cinematography, the effects. I know that that's kind of part of the point of it, is that they are kind of these laughably bad, cheap movies, but it's so grey, isn't it? It's just everything is like grey and murky and just so boring to look at, It
is so... It's the epitome of digital filmmaking at its worst, where everything looks that kind of just unpolished, and there's no real directorial flair. It's just very perfunctory, isn't it? It's going through the motions and telling the story it has to tell. But you're absolutely right. Obviously the visuals are atrocious, and water effects are notoriously hard to do at the best of times. To go with a premise that requires an awful lot of water CG is very brave, and it always just kind of looks like, something you've badly photoshopped on your mobile phone. And
yeah, exactly. It looks like an app, right?
The sharks look like, kind of JPEG images that have just been stuck on the screen a lot of the time. And they're not kind of really embedded in the backdrop or, interacting with the actors. So it's pretty hideous. Question for you, Mike. Do you know what version you watched of this movie?
I do not. Do you know what? I think it came up with something about a 10th anniversary version or something. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the version I watched as well, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't know that there were different versions out there until after the event, but the 10th anniversary version was released in 2023, apparently with loads of replaced and improved visual effects.
Oh my God. So we saw the improved version. Oh my God.
I dread to think what experience people had watching this in 2013, because this to me still looked pretty damn poor. There's a couple of moments, I think maybe I noticed one practical shark throughout the whole film. And there's that bit we'll get to at the end, which I thought looks reasonably okay. The final moment. But on the whole, hideous.
Hideous. But, so I think on the whole, I would say bad, not a good film. Didn't love it. But like you, Matt, I wasn't actively bored. I was kind of compelled to keep watching. I was like, throughout that 80 minutes, I was relatively entertained. I guess that's the best thing I could say about it, right? But I almost against my best wishes, because I don't really love what this studio, particularly the Asylum, sort of do with movies, right? Yep, maybe we should start by talking a bit about the Asylum. So this is this production company, right? That kind of they famously made this film and became quite successful off the back of this movie. How familiar with that studio and their work are you, Matt?
So before this discussion, not at all. I had a awareness of some of their titles. They're more recognizable ones that I've heard of, and you mentioned the term earlier, mockbuster, which I kind of love. That expression, I think, summarizes exactly what their kind of mission statement is, right? I think the Asylum started out as a distribution company back in the late 90s, and then they went into kind of production of their own films. And I read a bit of research. I found that it was around the time that Spielberg's War of the Worlds adaptation was landing, that they were also working on their own War of the Worlds adaptation, but obviously a much lower budget variant of that. And they were kind of just like through happenstance, they were due for a release around about the same time. So the Asylum deliberately released their adaptation a day before the Spielberg one hit cinemas. And of course, all of their stuff is straight to VHS or straight to VOD streaming now. And it's all made within the confines of strict budgetary requirements. So I think part of their modus operandi is to work with nothing that's over a £250,000 budget, but oftentimes they have like a £150,000 budget. Sharknado might have been a bit higher. They might have pumped a bit more up to like 2 million in there, but I think there's kind of conflicting reports that I was finding on that. But also they're still able to turn a profit on these small budget films. But part of their hook that they're catching audiences in with is riding in on the success of other big name properties. So that's exactly what they kind of inadvertently did with the War of the Worlds adaptation. And they retitled theirs H.G. Wells's War of the Worlds. But then you've got, after that, they kind of strike their niche, and suddenly you've got them releasing Snakes on a Train after Snakes on a Plane is a big success. You've got the Da Vinci Treasure coming out within a year of the Da Vinci Code. And you look through their list. Paranormal Entity is another horror one that I remember seeing. It's the kind of stuff
I remember seeing it in the DVD store.
It would always be, for anyone in the UK, the Poundland DVD section would be filled with this stuff.
Yes.
Or later on, it would be when you're scrolling through the Amazon horror horror listings, and you get past all the well-known stuff, and then you're really in the dregs. You've kept scrolling a bit too long, and then suddenly you encounter Paranormal Entity.
Exactly.
And
that.
and you know, unknowing audiences are going to go, oh, that must be a new sequel I hadn't heard about, or a new prequel to this film, this franchise that I love. So it's kind of like, on the one hand, I think I agree with maybe where you were going with it, Mike, which is like the moral and ethical implications of what the Asylum are doing are very dubious, and it's pulling the wool over the viewer's eyes to an extent, which I really don't agree with. But at the same time, they're kind of so unashamedly owning it. I kind of think, okay, well, that's your business model, and you're not doing anything illegal. And equally, you know, you could argue you're making a lot of those other films look better by comparison. So
yeah, it's
maybe.
true. It's true. Given that, you know, Snakes on a Plane isn't exactly like, you know, masterpiece of cinema either. The fact that you then get Snakes on a Train, it's like, well, did we need that? That kind of Snakes on a Plane kind of was that joke. Like, then it's like a joke of a joke almost, isn't it? It's so strange. But yeah, I agree. I think, you know, their films creatively bankrupt, right, essentially. But as a business model, as a money-making model, obviously it's a huge success. Like, they have done really, really well, and like fair play. Just not the sort of movies that I'm going to choose to watch or spend my money on, I think. But
for sure.
Yeah, they have done really well. There is all kinds of kind of controversy around them as well, right? And not just because of the sort of bad films they make, but also they don't work with unions and that kind of thing, right? So that they can work their actors like up to 20
Long
to 22
days.
hours per day. Everything for them is all about like spending as little money as possible and churning out these films as quickly and cheaply as possible, basically.
It veers into icky exploitative territory, doesn't it, when you read some of those reports around the kind of Sharknado itself was shot in 18 days, which, you know, actually, you know, for a low budget film, it uses a lot of locations. So it's quite impressive. They covered all of that in such a short time. Yeah, so you can imagine this must be an exhausting shoot for everyone, cast and crew involved.
Oh my God. Yeah.
But tricky dilemma, this one, isn't it?
It is. Like, I'm not, you know, I totally get that they are also just a bit of fun, and absolutely, and like that is totally fair enough. And if people get a lot out of them, particularly watching them, you know, late night with a few drinks with friends, like, great. And that is essentially what these are made for. And like you say, they know what they're making, they know who they're making it for, essentially, right? You know?
Yeah. And you know, there's always going to be someone like me who comes along here and has this morbid curiosity and goes, okay, right, well, I've watched Sharknado, so maybe I might just explore Sharknado's parts 2 to 6.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. Are you tempted, Matt? Are you going to check out the sequels?
Well, I mean, actually, speaking of morals and ethics in our day-to-day life, Mike, I do think, you know, your diligence has been questionable here, because you know that I have this obsessive compulsive disorder where I must complete every franchise I start. So
I'm enabling you, aren't I? Oh my God.
You hooked me in, and already last night I had a bit of spare time and I thought, shall I just bung on Sharknado 2 just to see where this is going? And I did. And then 80 minutes later, I realized I had wasted another evening for this fruitless exercise. So, you know, I probably will see parts 3 to 6 at some point.
Oh my God, I love this.
It's just, but you know, that's just me being the fool that I am.
That's incredible. Well, I might ask you about the second one at the end of this, but let's get into this first movie. Where do we begin? I don't really know. So it's directed by Anthony C. Ferrante. Like, we've talked a little bit about it's a pretty ugly looking movie, right? Yeah. But how do you find the general kind of direction of the movie and the way in which he's told this story, I suppose?
Perfunctory is the word I'd use for it. It is just going through the motions, you know. I had a look at Ferrante's filmography before this, and there's not really much of note on there. You know, this seems to be his kind of, you know, the project that he's stuck with very, very honorably. He's directed all of the films in the franchise.
Wow.
And we've got some returning cast that have appeared, Tara Reid and our leading actor, Ian Ziering they're in every installment. So, something's bringing them back. I'm presuming paychecks.
I would say so.
And I don't think they've made any bones about that either. So I can only imagine that Ferrante is equally, he's just cashing this in for what he can. But there's nothing in this which gives us a sense of the man behind the camera.
No.
It is just a point and shoot affair, as far as you can see, or point and blue screen affair in a lot of scenes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Obviously the Asylum have got their little production company based in Burbank, and in there they have a green screen studio, right? Which I think is where 90% of their films are actually made, I think, right? And that is definitely the case here. And I agree with you. Like in some ways, it's not badly made. It's not like when you might watch an Uwe Boll film, for example, where you're like, he can't even quite work out how to edit a scene together, right? Like, two people talking to each other can be edited wrong or something. Like, where this is like absolutely like efficiently made. It just, there is nothing more than that, is there? Essentially, like it's. I guess you might. This sounds mean against television, but there's something quite televisual about it. It's made for television, right, in a way, and it has that vibe about it.
This is it. It was a Sci-Fi Channel movie originally, wasn't it? So it's part of that dearth of stuff that they churn out all of the time, and you're absolutely on the money there. And I love your comparison with Uwe Boll, because responsible for some of the most badly made movies ever, and of course responsible for one of Tara Reid's other contributions to the genre in Alone in the Dark.
Yes.
So I love to track her career, from Josie and the Pussycats through Big Lebowski and Urban Legend, classic, love that.
Classic. And actually Tara Reid, I think, is great. She's always great.
Love her. And I love this for her as well, because, she had at this stage been through the media monster, hadn't she? She'd been chewed up and spat out in that wave of awful treatment of women through the 2000s with the likes of Lindsay Lohan, Britney Spears, Paris Hilton, you name it, all of these celebs who were criticized and targeted for their off-camera lifestyles and decisions, which were just frankly no one's goddamn business. So it was really nice that, even though it's a complete B movie, but this got her back in the public eye. And actually she was one of the big draws, and one of the things that made me interested in the movie when it came out was like, oh, okay, Tara Reid's back on screen. That's cool. Yeah. Good for her. It's a shame she's not given much to do in the film.
She's not like, her name is obviously like plastered all over she kind of gets top billing in a way, and yet she doesn't really do much in it, does she? I was kind of surprised.
She's really passive.
I thought she might be having a bit of fun in this movie, but sadly, again, not her fault, but her character of April doesn't really do anything, does she? It's weird.
She's really just the foil to be there to be rescued by Finn, isn't it? She's a plot device. She's there. She's the relationship there. Again, there's very little. We'll talk about the writing. There's very little investment in the relationships of these characters, but they do set up this kind of really flimsy love triangle between Finn and his one of his employees and his ex-wife, and we are introduced. I love how it introduces us to his children. All of his extended family. We kind of get drip fed. Oh, he has an ex-wife, and then a few scenes later, oh, he's got a daughter as well. Oh, and he's got a son as well. Like
when the son came into it, I was like, wait, how big is this family of theirs? Like,
I thought as part of the comedy of the film, I actually thought that was quite amusing if they just kept going and seeing how far they could go. So he was rescuing, second cousins twice removed or whatever. But
exactly. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. I don't think this is necessarily the film's priority, but how do you find those characters? And I think the actors, Tara Reid and everyone else there, John Hurd is in it for a bit, right? Like the cast do an absolutely fine job, really. Like they are doing what they do pretty well, I think.
I think they all know what film they're in, but they're not all, I would say they're not phoning it in. the material and the screenplay is not very stretching of their talents. So there's not a lot, there isn't a great deal of zippy, fun dialogue. It's just, everything is focused on pushing the scene to the next set piece, really, in its way, isn't it? It's every exchange between characters is talking about what we need to do next. How are we going to avert this threat? How are we going to get from A to B, whether that's Santa Monica Pier to Beverly Hills, from Beverly Hills to, the flight school where Finn's son is holed up. And we might get a slight detour by way of school bus full of children that need rescuing. But again, it's just a set piece, and it's kind of, we go through the motions. We know how it's going to end. There'll be some people who survive the scene. There'll be some people who get chomped by a flying tiger shark, and then we'll be in the next location, won't we?
I do love that there are, if you want shark attacks, there are shark attacks like every 2 minutes in this film, right? I mean, that's the thing. That's what you don't get in a movie like The Reef or even Jaws. You know, those moments of shark attacks are actually few and far between. Like they rely more on tension and all of that stuff. This movie doesn't rely on tension. It is just we will quite literally throw sharks at you every couple of minutes, right? And the body count must be pretty huge in this film, I think,
Yeah, the body count and the shark count, quite like you say, there are hundreds and hundreds of sharks literally pouring from the skies. And it's, there are some bits that are quite funny. It's the stupidity of John Hurd's character whacking a shark over the snout with a bar stool. That kind of makes you go, okay, where else are you going to see that on film? Okay. This creates a reason for that kind of stuff to be shoved in our faces. And that's fun. Okay. Where else are we going to see a man dive into a great white's mouth with a chainsaw?
Exactly.
It doesn't happen. And okay, fine. That kind of stuff won me over.
That won me over. That moment in particular. And I quite liked also love one of the main characters. I think her name's Nova, right? The girl that works at the bar. Sort of our main character throughout. Hilarious moment when she is eaten by a shark in the sky after she falls out of a helicopter, right? Clearly would be dead. And then coincidentally, later she's found still alive in a random shark's stomach when the guy goes through the shark with the chainsaw. Just incredible stuff. Love it.
Ludicrous. Yeah, great. I mean, but I suppose because of the world we're operating in here and the rules that have been established, aka there are none, we can really pretty much do anything, right? And, I alluded to the kind of the science of this, right? Okay, so I did a bit of research, Mike. Apparently, a Sharknado has not been ruled out as a possibility by the kind of the environmentalists and the meteorology board. So a Sharknado could happen. It hasn't been recorded in history. However, there are recorded instances from the 20th century. Sorry, no, not that recent, the 19th century, where a Gatornado has happened, and 6 to 7 baby alligators have been kind of swept up and been found, like scattered across a person's farm in America, right? Like it's. That does
happen, doesn't it? That's where the whole, the kind of myth, I guess, of the frogs raining from the sky comes from as well, right? Yeah, that comes from that kind of, those kind of weather phenomena, don't they? Yeah.
What I find quite funny is how in Sharknado, these hurricanes and tornadoes are just completely discriminate and will only suck up sharks. If you're any other kind of marine life, no, forget it. It's not going to happen.
No. Yeah, where were all the jellyfish? Where were all the squids? The tuna fish? There was none of that, right? It's just sharks. And I had no idea that there were so many sharks in the Pacific Ocean. Like you said, there are thousands of these things flying everywhere.
So many. If you were scared to get in the water before, now you seriously are after this.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, just on the threat though, you've got the Sharknado, which actually the Sharknados themselves don't really present themselves till like kind of the third act, do they? You don't get the actual great big twisters playing so much of a role. A lot of it is, kind of these great waves of floods through the city and, sharks kind of swimming along side by side with cabs and all that kind of silliness. But, taking it back to kind of a more serious point here, like, I don't know about you, but I found like watching this movie at this point in time was really like quite interesting given we're going through, watching the horrible devastation out in LA with the wildfires. And this was a film that was basically all about like just monsoons and flooding throughout LA.
Yeah.
And this kind of like
I actually did
mirror.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? That is not the kind of thing I was expecting to feel when watching Sharknado, but there was a weird poignancy to some of the conversations where they were like, oh, this isn't what we'd have expected to happen in LA. We always thought it would be the earthquakes that would get us, but it turns out it's the floods. And I was thinking in my head, like, oh my God, this is actually, it's the fires. Like, that's what's happening right now in LA. So that was weirdly kind of timely, actually, some of that stuff, wasn't it? Yeah.
And I don't know whether that might not hold up for future audiences, right? But at this moment, like, it's that weird, alchemy that you seem to conjure with your podcast a lot of the time, Mike, where you'll talk about a thing and then it will materialize. Or
it's weird, very weird. I know exactly, but yeah, I thought that too, and I thought, oh wow. I'm really, really trying desperately to kind of find more meat in Sharknado, but I thought that is something that is kind of interesting in that regard.
That was the reach we both came to.
Exactly. But I liked that, and I guess this ludicrous kind of thing of having tornadoes blowing sharks all over the place means that you can see sharks in places that we've never seen sharks before in movies. So you will be in the Hollywood Hills and there will be a shark swimming past, or there'll be a school bus and they'll look out the window and there will just be sharks swimming past, like on the sort of freeway and all of that kind of stuff, right? And they do have a lot of fun with that, of like, where are the weirdest places in a city where we can just shove sharks, essentially, right?
Yeah, exactly. This is kind of... it's that kind of fantasy realization that the film can afford itself, because it is perhaps not so concerned with the realism that another Hollywood big budget monster movie might try to give us, right? You wouldn't necessarily get that from The Meg because it's not brave enough to go that far, perhaps, or not stupid enough to go that far.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And I think I've read that in Snakes on a Train, they wanted to go that bit further, where they had a snake that was so large that it actually swallows the whole train at the end of the movie, and because Snakes on a Plane was just, really reserved and conservative in its approach.
God, it's so basic, Snakes on a Plane. God, yeah. I know, I love it. I love that. And fair play to them for going all out with that kind of thing, So yeah, like I guess there is basic fun to be had in this movie. Will I ever sit through this movie again in my life? I hope not, to be honest. But there was basic fun to be had. So that's kind of the best I can say about it. And let me finish by asking you, before we move on to the next film, you've seen one sequel, right? How did that compare?
It's far more knowing, part two. I think it's realized, obviously, at this point, it's a year later that it's been released. It's seen the way that this has taken a hold with the general public and become like such a zeitgeisty moment, right? Everyone is talking about Sharknado at this moment in time. So it's very much in the first, the opening scene, it sets up its stall, and we've got cameos from Kelly Osbourne and Cara Delevingne getting their heads chopped off on a plane. We've got, what's the actor who plays Rachel in The Craft's name? I can't remember, but another horror kind of stalwart there, back in as an airplane pilot. Perez Hilton gets taken out in there. So, it's bringing in all of these like pop culture people from the moment and putting them through it. And obviously, I guess they themselves would have been signing up to be a part of this because of the phenomena that it's become at this stage. It's a lot more self-aware. Totally. It's a lot more self-referential, but on the whole, pretty much doing the same thing. It's a bit globe-trotting. It is, suddenly we're in New York this time round, and Finn ends the movie by riding a giant great white shark and impaling it on top of the Empire State Building.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, this is it. They're going to come up with just more and more, I imagine, insane scenarios and where to put sharks throughout the sequels, right?
I think we get into like time travel. We get into Tara Reid losing an arm and then replacing it with a bionic saw blade. We get into
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
It just stretches and stretches and tries to outdo itself, of course, as you would expect it to. So like I say, my interest has been piqued enough to maybe give these a try at least once, just to close off the cycle. But
it won't be long before Stevie will make you do a whole Patreon series about them.
It would fit quite nicely over there, wouldn't it?
It would. It very much would. Yeah, but I think that's interesting that obviously it aired on television, like you said, on the Sci-Fi Channel. I think 1.3 million viewers watched it, which is kind of slightly below average, I think, for what they were expecting. But then on social media, suddenly people started talking about it, and you had celebrities like Will Wheaton and Olivia Wilde, and apparently Damon Lindelof were kind of tweeting about the film. And then it kind of increased in kind of word of mouth, and then it got repeated on Sci-Fi, and the viewing figures went up to 2 million, and then it went up again on a third airing to like over 3 million. And it's just kind of, it just grew like that, really, where it did. It became this very kind of memeable, I guess, thing that more and more people just wanted to check out. So again, fair play to them.
Yeah, they found their gap in the market. I mean, interesting. Something we haven't said. I don't know about you, Mike, but I was really surprised when I looked back at this and thought, okay, this was 2013, because I always think of it as being a lot earlier. I think of this as being kind of mid-noughties, and I was expecting something kind of really bro-y. And I know this might maybe segue quite nicely into the next film we're about to talk about, but I was surprised to see that there isn't that much of that in this. You know, there's not a great deal of, that Nova character, she's the kind of sexy, hot action chick, but, she's not really subjected to the male gazy stuff too much.
No tits and arse in this film.
No TNA.
Which I was kind of surprised about.
Kind of disappointed by as well.
I guess maybe that's part of the made-for-TV restrictions,
maybe,
I wonder. Because I wonder if that's what it is, because you're right. I think that was a surprising thing to me. It felt like this movie would have been made for that kind of bro horror audience. Yeah. And it doesn't have any of that in it. That's quite strange.
For sure. I mean, the worst I could say about it is that maybe it has a bit of a pro-traditionalist view towards the family unit. You've got this whole plot of Finn restoring the family, and they are very much, the white Americans, very wealthy thing. So, I kind of saw that and thought, okay, that's kind of a bit conservative and maybe telling of the time there. But
yes, totally. But on the whole,
it's not too offensive or lecherous, is it?
It's not offensively bad. Yeah. Absolutely. No, you're right. Any highlight moments that we haven't mentioned? It's got to be that chainsaw through the mouth thing, right?
Without a doubt. I did quite like the prologue on the shark poaching boat. They're out there catching shark, and there's this kind of like crime underground business transaction with a guy over shark fin soup.
Shark fin soup.
Crazy. And that turns into just quite a fun, like, opening Sharknado massacre, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah.
But then the Santa Monica Pier destruction was quite good, with the big wheel, the Ferris wheel. That
was good.
Crashing down and destroying everyone. I mean, the stuff in the Beverly Hills with Tara Reid's house looked really bad.
Real bad. Yeah. The scene on the bus, I suppose, was kind of fun in a way.
Yeah.
The problem is, like we said at the very beginning, none of it looks good. That's the problem. Like, when you're a film that relies on your big monster set pieces, it's such a shame that it just looks so ugly and awful, Yeah.
And like you alluded to earlier, there's just no suspense or tension in any of this. The film is not interested in that in the slightest. So everything is just from big, wide angle. You're shown absolutely everything all on screen in front of you, and it's undisguisably ugly. So
there you go.
We've met before, haven't we?
I don't think so. Where was it you think we met?
At your house, don't you remember? As a matter of fact, I'm there right now.
What do you mean you're where right now?
at your house. That's fucking crazy, man. Call me. I told you I was here.
Before we move into the second movie of this week's episode, I've just got to take a minute for another David Lynch related announcement, because we have collaborated with the beautiful Ultimate Picture Palace Cinema in Oxford for something that I have been dreaming of being able to do my whole life. We are going to be hosting a whole weekend of David Lynch movies. If you are in or within reach of Oxford, come on down to the Ultimate Picture Palace on the 15th and 16th of March. That's a Saturday and a Sunday. We are going to be there. That's me and my co-host Becky Dark and a couple of other special guests to bring you a very special weekend. We're going to be screening 4 David Lynch films across the 2 days: Blue Velvet, Eraserhead, Fire Walk with Me and Lost Highway. So you'll have a chance to see all 4 of those cult classics on the big screen in a beautiful cinema. Each of those movies will also have special introductions by us. We'll be serving black coffees, cherry pies, of course, and there'll be lots of EOH and prize giveaways. And we are also going to be recording an hour-long live on-stage discussion of David Lynch and his career as part of that lineup. So you can now buy your tickets. If you head to evolutionofhorror.com/events, you can pick up either a festival pass that will get you access to everything all weekend, or you can pick up single tickets for any individual screenings or events. So that's the 15th and 16th of March in the Ultimate Picture Palace in Oxford for a special Evolution of Horror David Lynch weekend. I absolutely cannot wait. So one more time, if you want to grab your tickets, head on over to evolutionofhorror.com/events. Okay, let's hurtle into the second half of this week's episode, in which Matt Draper and I discuss Zombeavers from 2014.
You girls from out of town?
We're staying over there in my cousin's place. We were looking for beavers.
Well, hell, ain't we all?
I've had enough excitement for one day. What was that? Someone in there? There's a beaver in the bathroom! Kill it! Yuck. Can we please go swimming now? Ever occurred to any of you that there might be more beavers?
The fuck?
Is that blood?
Holy shit!
Never seen a real beaver before.
What a title. I'll keep it brief again because it's telling us what we need to know. After a truck transporting biomedical chemicals accidentally dumps a canister of toxic waste in a river, which then becomes lodged in a nearby beaver dam, the resident colony of beavers take on zombie-like qualities and terrorize a trio of young women who are weekending at a local log cabin to somewhat transformative results.
Indeed. It's a cabin in the woods movie. It's a zombie movie.
Yeah.
It's an animal attack movie. It's everything you could want in a movie in 86 minutes. I tell you what, I do love that both these movies were under 90 minutes long, right? Like that is a dream, absolute dream.
We could all look to them.
So there's some positive stuff to say. Now, Matt, what did you think of Zombeavers?
Okay, this film has a lot more. I'm going to go with the positives first. It has a lot more creativity. It looks like people have really tried to do something good here.
Yes.
You know, they've put a lot of effort into it.
Yes.
The screenplay is zippy. You know, there's some good zingy dialogue. It's really self-aware and is really hard leaning into that comedy. That comedy might not be to everyone's taste. As a critique, you could argue that might not be for everyone. And when a film advertises up front on its poster that it's from the production team of American Pie or Cabin Fever, that gives you a hint as to what you might be getting.
Oh, yeah.
And Cabin Fever is quite a good parallel, I think, there, isn't it? Because, yeah,
Agreed.
this is
it's a bit
like,
Eli Roth. It's a bit Eli Roth, this movie, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? It's definitely taking from the kind of gross out sex comedy tradition, marrying that with some, really, really fun kind of tropey horror monster creature feature stuff. And, I went through a bit of a journey with this throughout that short runtime from, oh, okay, interesting. I could get on board with this to, oh, this is icky and gross and I don't know if I like it. And then back around full circle to, okay, I think I'll let that one have a pass at the end because what I think it did do right. And I think, you brought to my attention that this was written by 3 dudes, right?
It sure was.
It sure as shit was. And 3 dudes writing 3 lead female characters is always going to be sketchy territory.
The way those girls talk to each other, you're just like, there's no way. You didn't even have to check that it was written by 3 dudes, right? It's the most obvious thing. Yeah.
It couldn't have been anything else. It's also, while some of that's not good, some of that doesn't do it for me, but it's also very, in the way that like a Trey Parker and Matt Stone production, it's indiscriminately taking the piss out of everything and everyone involved. So, no one is safe, and therefore it's kind of fair game, equal territory, right? The 3 lead women are going to be made to look silly and have to do awful things. But also, we're going to get the bonus that some of the men are going to have their genitals mutilated as well along the way.
Yes.
So
yes.
That's okay.
Yes, exactly that. So I did watch this film, I think when it first came out, with my housemate at the time. I was living with my friend James and we watched it, and I think we had a really fun time with it. And I remember us, we were just drinking beers and watching it and probably half paying attention while we were chatting and stuff. And I remember this movie being it was fun. I liked the kind of creature feature effects. I liked the puppets of the beat. And I remember thinking, I had quite fond memories of this film. And then rewatching it this week, I did feel a bit bad for you, Matt, because I was like, oh, this is not as good as I remember it being. And I think, like you say, it has kind of some different issues to Sharknado. I think this movie actually looks a zillion times better. It's shot and lit like a movie. It actually looks like it's quite nicely shot for a low budget horror movie. It does some interesting things technically. Obviously, I love the beavers. I love the puppet zombie beavers.
Are gorgeous.
So good, right?
Adorable.
Absolutely love them. There's none of that kind of weightless grey CGI in this movie. So I really appreciate that. However, yes, this is a movie that way more leans into its script, into its one-liners, into its sex bro comedy vibe. And again, speaking of a movie that feels like it should have been made in the mid-2000s and not in 2014, right? This movie, like you said, you think of Cabin Fever, you think of American Pie. You don't think of movies that were coming out in 2014 like The Babadook and It Follows, do you? There's quite a difference.
Isn't that telling that actually The Babadook came and changed the trajectory for horror straight after this, right? That is very clear. Because, I don't know, was this a big movie at the time? I never heard of it before you mentioned this to me that we were watching. So I was I kind of just went, cool. Okay, Mike. Good. Yeah, fine. Nice pick. You know something I don't know, but okay.
I just wanted to find the 2 best puns, basically. Sharknado and Zombeavers.
How could you have overlooked Lava Lantula, one of my absolute faves?
That is good. That is good. To be fair, there are a lot of great titles to choose from, right? In this area, in this genre. I think technically not a bad film, but I think it does feel super dated in a lot of ways, more on a script level than anything else.
It is. Yeah, you're right. And there's that really icky bit kind of in the first act where we just have an excuse for one of our actors to be topless on a raft sunbathing, and then all of the characters make a big deal out of the fact that she's topless, and then more people keep encountering her, and the local hunting guy kind of comes along and comments on her nudity. And I watched that thinking, oh, this is just not nice. And like, what was this for the actor? And then I actually looked up an interview with the actor, and she had absolutely no problem with it, allegedly. She was like, she was very much like, oh, we don't need to be so prude. Free the nipple, right?
Fair play.
Maybe I just need to stop being so prude, And we talk a lot about how like sex has been sucked out of cinema, and maybe we're on the cusp of that changing now. Maybe we need to be more 2014, be more Zombeavers.
Maybe we do need to be more. Now, I wonder if they made the beaver vagina joke one too many times in this in this script as well.
Can one even be considered one too many? Yeah.
Oh, so funny. Like the dialogue, I mean, it is like schoolboy humor, right? Basically, that's what it is.
It is.
Yeah.
And you saying that, now I know 2014, we're the same age, Mike, so I know you wouldn't have been a schoolboy, so I won't condescend to call you one when you were enjoying it. But as I watched this, I thought, if I were 15, I would have probably loved this, and I probably would have had it on DVD. So that's what it says about me.
So, yeah, what do we talk about with this? What did you think of those characters? Like, did you get much of a sense of character with these three girls and their relationship to one another? Did that not really matter for this movie?
I think it actually does matter more to this movie, more so than the character play does in Sharknado, because actually a great source of the plot driver is this again, their kind of relationships. So the whole reason for the three girls having gone to the cabin is because Jen, one of them, has been through a nasty breakup, and she's having a kind of like, it's complicated back and forth with her ex, and the girls are, seemingly in a kind of pro-sisterhood move. They're taking her out on this trip to help her kind of move on and forget it and put her troubles aside. But we very quickly learn that actually all of these people are reprehensible and, they're not really good friends. In fact, one of them was the person who has cheated with her boyfriend and is the reason for their breakup. So then that kind of drama all unfolds while zombie beavers are breaking into the cabin and chewing their way through the walls and floor. And then, of course, to top it all off, the three guys, the bros, all turn up, including said ex of Jen, and then it does turn into this kind of partnering off, but equally, the kind of the conflict that arises from that situation becomes the backdrop to all the murder and gives us reason to cheer on the zombie beavers as they start to decimate these absolutely deplorable bunch of characters.
Yeah, completely agree with you. I all of the characters were awful, but I was quite happy to watch them all get destroyed by zombie beavers throughout, right? Like, and loved them. I mean, and so the whole kind of premise, I guess, to these zombie beavers is classic, right? A bit of toxic waste goes in the river, goes in the dam, essentially.
We're talking zombies in the kind of Return of the Living Dead sense, whereas they aren't the dead that have re-risen; they have been kind of infected by something. So
exactly.
Yeah. What I wasn't expecting was where they take that premise, because I really did expect it to kind of play it quite straight with just like, zombie beavers are what we get, and we get some really fun stuff where one of the beavers gets sawn in half, and then its separate appendages are still wriggling about and still on the crawl. And what we must comment on, of course, is this film is purely practical, right? This is all puppetry and maybe some animatronics in there. So we're against the contrast of Sharknado, where it's that really ugly CG we've talked about. Even though this looks pretty cheap, it's not. No one is going to be convinced these aren't like Gizmo level puppets. They are. Still, they have weight, they have tangibility on screen, and the characters that the cast are genuinely interacting with something. And there's a lot of that, writhing around, holding the puppet that actors do, which is just like the best.
Good.
So, I mean, It looks really fun, and it's got some really good kind of grisly, gruesome moments I enjoyed.
A lot of gore. Yeah. They are vicious. These zombievers are vicious, right? They're like roaring and growling and gnashing and jumping at people. And I was really into it. Basically, anytime there was a zombiever attack, I was into it. You know, so much fun. Loved it. Yeah.
And what makes them zombie beavers? Like the on appearances, apart from when they start to get dismembered and don't die, they are they basically just have like what kind of green glowy eyes. Is that the only thing that really marks them apart from a regular beaver?
Yeah, I think, you know, zombie purists would argue that these are not zombies, really, are they? Like you've already said, it's more like they're just infected. It's almost more like those kind of radioactive atomic monsters of the 50s or something, aren't they? You know,
yes,
more like that. But of course, that way you don't get the Zombeaver pun, right? And of course, you know, this is probably the sort of thing where the title came first, the story came second. You know,
you can just see the elevator pitch for this, can't you? Unfolding, and like all of these movies, like studios are just signing off on that premise alone. I mean, it's nasty. The zombievers are fucking horrible. Like, I mean, that moment with the dog.
Yes,
that was genuinely upsetting.
Really upsetting. Yes, yeah. And also, how dated does this seem? At the end of the film, there are outtakes as well, and that seems like a very 90s 2000 thing that you get the outtakes at the end. But I love that in the outtakes at the end, you see this dog just happily swimming and like curiously kind of looking at these zombie beavers in the water, these kind of puppets, and the filmmaker's like, you're supposed to be scared of them, you know? So sweet. But yeah, no, it's true. It's pretty vicious, right? It kills off the dog. It kills off most of our characters in pretty gnarly ways. And again, it's so kind of juvenile, but there are so many shots of like our main girls, like sort of with her legs open and a beaver just like coming towards her, right? As well. And it's like, all right, we get it. We get the gag. Like
of classic. And the Piranha remakes couldn't have helped this, right? They were a year or two before, right? So, you know, that tying monster movie with sex comedy kind of
absolutely
had its moment around about this time, didn't it?
Totally. And even Snakes on a Plane, right? There is the famous guy gets his cock bitten off by the snake as well.
In the Mile High scene, of course.
The kind of genital trauma in these movies at this time was always a big gag, a big joke, right?
Yeah. But you know, when the characters are deplorable like the ones in this film, I welcome it and embrace it.
Problem is that I find beavers, the animals, beavers, I find them so cute.
Yep, thank you for clarifying.
I know, I was like, this is all so weird. I find them so adorable. I find it, even in this movie, find it quite hard to find the puppet versions of them quite, you know, scary or threatening, you know, like...
Sure, yeah. I did put myself in your shoes, actually, Mike, because I know you have your rabbits, your pets, and I thought beavers, rabbits, a similar kind of family, I guess. Like, vibes. You know, they're giving big eyes, big teeth, very cute.
And I'm obsessed with it. My Instagram often presents me with like these cute videos of like, here's a beaver that for some reason somebody has in their apartment, and this beaver is like picking up all of like these toys and objects around the house and like kitchen utensils, and is like walking along the corridor with them, is using them to build a little dam, like build a little wall in their apartment, because this is just what they instinctively do, right? They just love building dams. I don't know why.
Yeah. I mean, they're productive. They're hardworking contributors to the animal world. Who can knock them? I mean, I don't know what I would do if I had one in my home. Like, I just probably would be a little bit frightened, just because.
Bit weird. It's a bit weird to have one in your home, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I would worry. Is that going to lash out because it's frightened? How do I kind of like comfortably move that back into its own space?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I once had, like, I get every year, kind of around April time, seagulls. I live right by the beach, and seagulls nest on my roof.
Oh, wow.
And this one year, one of their babies fell from the nest onto the kind of outdoor balcony thing. And when the nesting is happening and when the babies are being born, you can't even walk down my street for seagulls swooping down and attacking you on the road, right?
What?
You know, it is Hitchcock's The Birds,
Jesus.
like brought to life. If you come too close, they will swoop out of protectiveness for their babies. But when I had one on my balcony, like I couldn't even step out there out of fear, because the gulls were flying down off my roof and kind of trying to target us, either by shitting on us. They literally dive bombed us, or trying to kind of like claw at us. So, we ended up having to get someone from the RSPCA out to come and like gently bundle the gull up into a towel and then sneak it outside and place it back on a safe surface, because we couldn't put it just on the ground because we have foxes around here and it hadn't learned how to fly. So it has to go on a really elevated surface until it can learn how to take off on its own, but away from me.
My God, yeah, you nearly got Tippy Hedrond there then if you'd stepped out onto the balcony.
Full blown tippied. I mean, that's the stuff of nightmares, isn't it?
Oh my God. Well, there you go. I don't think there's a whole lot more to discuss when it comes to Zombeavers, Matt, but overall,
I would argue we probably need to discuss the final developments as the humans become infected.
Well,
by
that's
the
true.
Zombeavers.
That's true. I suppose in the final act, it actually does. Oh my God, yeah. It sort of does become more of a zombie film because the humans start to be infected. When the girl transforms into the zombie beaver and the buck teeth come out, incredible stuff.
And when she grows that flat beaver tail and just paddling it against the ground in like a kind of aggressive stance. I actually really loved all of that transformative stuff, the transformation stuff. That's where it kind of won me over, and I thought, okay, pretty cool.
This is the thing, filmically, cinematically, this film is doing so much more fun, interesting things, I think, than Sharknado. I will give it that. Yeah.
Absolutely agree.
So there you go. Overall, are these two movies that you would recommend to anyone, Matt, do you think?
To the right person, yeah. Now that may be a rare and unusual breed of person, but I think, I'm very much of the mindset that if you're interested, if you're curious, everyone should watch something once. Form your own opinions, check it out, make a judgment call. It might really be for you. Just because it wasn't necessarily for us, it doesn't mean it isn't for someone else. I wouldn't necessarily be, urging people. This isn't the film, like I'm not reaching out to my mates to say, oh my God, you have to check out Zombeavers from 2014, hidden gem. Like no one's going to think that, but if you've got nothing better to do and you've got a spare 80 minutes, give it a bash. I'd love to know what people think of it.
I sort of agree with that. Like I said, I had a really fun time, watching it with friends with a couple of beers, and I think that's probably the way to watch it. This Variety review, I kind of agree with it. It said, Zombeavers is not a total wash. Seen at night, under the right circumstances of low expectations and controlled substances, it may even seem better than it really is, right? And I think that's fair.
Hard agree, yes.
Amazing. Well, there you go. Well, Matt, thank you for this. I was worried we'd have nothing to talk about with these two films, but, we've always got shit we can talk about.
We've stretched the material, haven't we? We've done okay.
Yeah, I would say so. Let's talk about some good movies in this subgenre for a moment. What's your fave in this whole Nature Bites Back world, would you say?
Yeah, it's always the hardest one, isn't it? It's always the hardest question because, naturally, Jaws, Godzilla, the birds, they're the ones, they're the right answers. Of course they are. And the ones I've got to say, I'm going to kind of go elsewhere with it though. I gave it a bit of a thought, something like, I love a plant horror. I love Little Shop of Horrors. Can I include that? Is nature kind of sci-fi aliens, but the musical.
It's a banger.
Yeah, absolutely. Would we class Titanic in this?
You know what?
Iceberg?
You know what? I was tempted. Because I was doing Deep Rising and I thought, wouldn't that be hilarious to pair Deep Rising with Titanic? But I chickened out. But I think you can include Titanic for sure.
I guess if the film were more interested in the iceberg itself, if we got a bit more characterization of the iceberg, maybe we could go with that. But, another one, so, okay, coming back from Thailand recently, I did the cliche move of, I'm going to revisit Danny Boyle's The Beach, right? The film that launched a load of backpacking and, tourist culture. Okay, so, that's definitely through the lens of this, this subgenre, a really interesting discussion, a very, very flawed film, doesn't hold a candle to the incredible Alex Garland novel, but as a film about the horrors of humanity, which are completely inspired by this paradise location and the intoxicating and corruptive beauty that a place that we as people try to seek for its kind of, its purity and its untouched by man feel. It's such an interesting film. And it does have real moments of horror in there, people doing awful things to each other. There's that bit where a guy is screaming for dental pain in the beach, but they won't let him out because they can't give away the location. So they just rip his tooth out without anesthetic and he just has to get on with it. And then there's the guy who gets attacked by a shark, but he survives, and they just shove him basically outside of the camp because they don't want to have to look at him because it's too unpleasant for everyone. It's ruining this illusion they've built for themselves of this community, this freedom community. And I just was watching that. That really gave me a lot of thought as to like, wow, what a fascinating film. And the parallel of course, of the actual damage that film very reportedly had on the location of Maya Bay in Thailand where they filmed it, they ended up causing a huge amount of destruction to the natural environment around there. And of course the tourism since then has only further added to that. So really that
is fascinating. I kind of wish I thought to include that, Matt, on the list. It's a good shout. It's a very good shout. Yeah.
Hey, well, there you go. Love if you need also ran discussion, Mike, you can have that from me.
Yeah. Exactly.
But as I said, that's a very flawed film. It's not my favourite. The right answer I'm landing on, I will give you my final answer, is The Descent, because it's just fucking brilliant, isn't it? Like, how can anyone not? As a modern classic, it is up there. And I think it will be, maybe in years to come, the film that future reviewers and journalists are saying, well, obviously The Descent can't be included because, like Jaws, it's just too clearly the best. Like,
I hope so. I agree. It deserves to be included in that conversation with the best of the best. The Descent. It's a proper horror masterpiece, isn't it? Yeah, love it. Excellent choices, Matt. Well, thank you. It's been such a joy to have you here, as always, and discussing such wonderful films as well, Matt. So thank you. I promise, come back next season, we'll talk about something better together. I promise.
Any conversation with you is a dream, Mike, but thank you for having me. It is always a dream to be brought back in, and I'll be waiting in the wings for when you next meet me.
Amazing. Let people know where they can come and find you, Matt. Where can they find you on the socials and look at your disgustingly beautiful holiday pics?
So yeah, I've got 2 Instagram accounts, so you can check out the disgusting holidays at Draper Did That, all one word, or you can check out if you're more interested in just kind of the genre stuff, I have a huge collection of horror vinyl soundtracks, which I post regularly on my other account, which is Draper's Discs. That's pretty much what I'm doing.
Amazing.
Or you can check us out. I'm usually over on Brain Rot with Stevie Webb every month. We're having a brief hiatus at the moment, but we are midway through a Wrong Turn franchise retrospective. We've done 4 of those journeys. So, all of this is just kind of strengthening, training, preparation for films like Sharknado. This is why I can really withstand the dregs of cinema, Mike.
Yeah, you're doing God's work, Matt. You're watching these movies so that we don't have to.
Doing it so you don't have to. Exactly. But I really, really encourage people to do it with me and come and join us over there and get involved in the dialogue.
Amazing. Matt, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike. Bye.
And that's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening. And one more time, a huge thank you to my brilliant guest, Matt Draper. Well, that was a really fun discussion. I didn't love those 2 films, but I thought that they were fun to talk about. And I would now love to hear your thoughts. Please do get in touch. You can email me, evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can also find me on all the socials, of course. Evolution of Horror is on Instagram and Facebook. And you can also find me, Mike Muncer, on Instagram and Blue Sky. If you want to subscribe subscribe to our Patreon and get treated to regular bonus episodes, then head on over to patreon.com/evolution of horror. You can find this podcast in all the usual podcast places, and I'd be so grateful if you could drop us a little rating and review on your podcast app of choice, as that always really helps us get discovered by new listeners. So, on to next week then. And of course, next week, it's a staple of any season of the Evolution of Horror, particularly as we reach the end. To wrap things up, next week, I'm going to be joined by Brad Hanson, and we are going to be bringing you a special Nature Bites Back Also Rans. So we will not be discussing anything in depth. Brad will be coming armed with several recommendations for other animal attack and eco horror movies that you should check out. So join us next week for all of this and more on the Evolution of Horror.